Hello, everybody. I'm Lara Rathod, the creator and host of Girl Woman. I am so excited to have you with us today, and I really hope that you enjoy the series. Now, when I filmed episode 1, part 1, and I watched it back, I realized that I had made a mistake, and it was something that I needed to address up front. And so the mistake that I made was at about minute 13, I talk about watching a recent Instagram live with Scott Stewart, who's at Stop Creates on Instagram, and Bethany Meyers. And the Instagram live discussed many things, but particularly they discussed body neutrality. And the mistake that I made was that when I was referring to Bethany, I misgendered them. I used the wrong pronouns. So I used the pronouns she and her, when actually Bethany's correct pronouns are they and them. And once I'd realized my mistake, I had to figure out what I was going to do about it. And I thought that actually it was important for me as the creator and host of the series to set the tone and to model what I think that we all need to do as human beings when we make mistakes, because we are human and we make mistakes. And even when we don't intend to, we can sometimes cause harm. In this case, the harm is not just to Bethany, because I misgendered them. The harm is also to anybody that's watching the series and who has also felt the sting and the hurt and the pain of being misgendered. And hearing me do it could be very triggering. One of the core principles of the Girl Woman series, and one of the things I've impressed upon all of the guests, is that I want Girl Woman to be a safe space, an inclusive, intersectional, safe space, not only for my guests, but also for the audience. And that is why I think it's very important for me to take accountability, to acknowledge that I made this mistake, and to apologize, and going forward to learn from this and to consciously make a huge effort to not do this again. And so to apologize, Bethany, I am sorry for misgendering you. And so now I'm very excited for you to watch episode 1, Being 30-something with Karime Kuri, part 1. Hey everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Girl Woman. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking to Karime Kuri about being 30-something. So before we kick off, Karime has very kindly agreed to do a grounding exercise with us. So if you're driving or walking, you might want to not close your eyes, but otherwise, if you're just listening to it and you'd like to be present with us, you can close your eyes and follow her instructions. Over to you, Karime.
Thank you, Lara. So happy to be here. So I invite you and our audience to just arrive here and now by closing our eyes and really breathing in deeply, a very deep, slow, refined breath. We can take 5 breaths to really open up and arrive here and now. So let's start at your own pace, 5 deep breaths. If you're ready, open your eyes and just welcome.
Thank you so much. I think I took about 10. I'm clearly like nervous anticipation of getting started. Okay, so everybody, what you will notice when I ask my guests to introduce themselves is it's a very intentional introduction. And I've chosen this type of introduction for two reasons. The first reason is that I think by my guests introducing themselves in this way, it will contextualize their lived experience. And the second reason is that I believe that representation not only matters, but it is so intrinsic and essential when we see ourselves represented on screen, in books, in whatever format. And I hope by my guests introducing themselves in this way, this will help you see yourself represented in any particular way. Now, of course, little disclaimer, my guests are sharing from their own lived experience. They're obviously not a monolith, speaking for the whole of their race, religion, nationality, etc. I know you know that, but the lawyer in me feels it's necessary to say that up front. So, okay, Karime, please can you introduce yourself to us?
Of course. Well, my name is Karime. I'm of Mexican nationality, and I am of a very interesting heritage, actually. I'm a fun mix of Lebanese, Southern European, and indigenous Mexican. So it's a really fun cocktail that I represent. I was born and raised in Mexico City. When I was a teenager, I moved to live in Canada for all of my high school. So I was really exposed to a really cosmopolitan city, Montreal. Then I went back to Mexico, lived there for another 10, 12 years, and moved to live to Oxford in the United Kingdom. And after that, I moved to San Francisco, California in the United States. So I'm pretty eclectic in the way I've been raised and the cultures I've been exposed to. My pronouns are she, her. I am heterosexual, and I am not religious, though I am very spiritual and I have walked a very deep spiritual path in my life, but I don't identify with any particular religion. And what else can I say about that?
And where are you living right now?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. I've been traveling for 15 months with my partner. We haven't had a home for the last 15 months. And just 2 days ago, we arrived to our destination where we're starting our new life chapter, which is Amsterdam in the Netherlands. So this is what I can call home, I guess, from now on, but it's been only 2 days. So I still feel like I'm a citizen of the world. And while I settle down, I still feel like I'm everywhere.
I think that's a really lovely way of thinking about it as well, right? Being a citizen of the world. I feel like that very much as well, because, you know, while I was born in the UK, I was raised in Bahrain and Istanbul. So I was a third culture kid. And I came back to the UK when I was 14, and I've been here for over 30 years now in London. But I still think of myself with a very international mindset. And I think that that really helps me find connection between myself and other people. And actually, connection, maybe we should tell everybody the story of how we actually first met. Because I think it's a lovely, I feel it's a synchronous spiritual connection.
It truly is.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, of course, of course. So while I was living in Oxford, I was studying at the University of Oxford, and I took a trip to Mexico City to actually get married. And so I was coming back from my marriage, coming back to my master's degree to continue with my master's degree. And as I was getting on the plane, we were standing in a long queue for a long time because there was something going on with the plane, I think technical issues or something. And then Lara was standing in the queue right before me, and then she turned over, she looked at my nose piercing, which actually I have changed, but it was a Mayan symbol of conversation. It's like a little beautiful design, and she looked at it and she said, wow, that's a beautiful nose ring. And I said, well, it actually means conversation in the Mayan design and in the Mayan culture. And then she's like, wow. And then it really sparked a conversation between us.
Yes, it was so amazing, because I remember being in the queue. So I was flying back from the west coast of the States, coming back to London, and we were boarding, and then suddenly there was this hold up, And I remember like being in the queue and feeling like, you know what, you're not in a rush. Just relax into the waiting. It doesn't really matter. You know, you don't have to board by a certain time. And so I relaxed and I was silent and I was just very kind of present. And then I looked around and you were, as you said, directly behind me. And the really interesting thing, and this is why I feel it was such a synchronous connection between us, is that I was supposed to be sitting next to you on the plane, but I had changed my seat at the boarding gate to have a little bit more room. And so, I mean, it's almost like the universe wanted us to meet, like whichever way they wanted us to meet.
We couldn't escape the divine appointment. That was it.
And now you are my very first guest in this very exciting series, and I'm so thrilled to do this with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lara. I'm so honored to kickstart this with you.
So let's see. First question. What 4 words would you use to describe yourself?
Describing myself is always an interesting exercise for me, especially because I love the fact that I find myself to be very fluid. I don't find myself to be a picture in time. I really have different cycles, and I really see my transition in life. And so defining myself or describing myself is always a challenging exercise. It's almost like taking a picture of myself in that very moment.
Well, but at this very moment, then.
At this very moment.
At this very moment, because I, like you, very much believe that life is about growth and change and evolution. And so at this moment in time, what 4 words would you use to describe yourself?
Yeah, I would describe myself as a very loving person. In everything I do, I really put love forth. And I think love is my main driver. So very loving, extremely curious, both about myself and about the environment and about others. I'm always trying to understand the cause and effect around me and within me. So extremely curious. I also consider myself to be very deep, and I don't know how that comes across in English. And if it's very deep, I really love depth.
Soulful.
I really love soulful, but I think it's more about the depth of reality. Like I really like to go beyond the surface and really go into the depth
underneath the story, like the story underneath. Yeah,
absolutely. I love to go past. Yeah, I like to go past the first surface or the first impression or what seems to be the truth. I always go deeper and deeper, and I always ask these childlike questions. But why? But is that so? But what if not? What if I really love the depth of things in life and people, obviously. And another word I would say is I am extremely energetic. So I am really passionate. I am really fiery. There's so much life in me, and I am in the presence of that life constantly. And I would say I'm just a bomb of energy. And yeah, that's who I am right now.
Oh, I love that. And I see a lot of resonance between you and me already. And I had no idea what words you were going to pick, but definitely some of those are my words too. So would you describe yourself as a feminist? And if so, what does that word mean to you?
I wouldn't describe myself as a feminist. For me, I think I subscribe to the spirit of the feminist movement. I really, really do, and I'll explain a little bit on that in a second. But I just want to say that for me, the word has really a lot of. It has collected a lot of different views under it. It's now an umbrella that has collected different views, different movements. I mean, all kind of aiming at the same thing, which I call the spirit of the movement. But I do think that the word now means different things to different people.
Like
so if
love.
I would, right, exactly. So if I would say right now that I am a feminist, that would really resonate differently with different people, right? And that's different. We are maybe in a different understanding of what it is like to be a feminist. So I would maybe walk away from the description of myself as being a feminist, but I would get closer to the spirit of the feminist movement, which is I truly, deeply believe in a world of equal access, equal rights, equal freedom between genders, between sexes, and even across. I would even expand that word. I'm a humanist. I'm not a feminist. You know, I would expand it across all different labels that we have put on ourselves, right? Be it sex, gender, nationality, etc. But regarding the feminist movement, I really subscribe to the idea of living in a world of egalitarianism, you know, a world where it really doesn't matter what your sex or gender is. You really are treated with on the same level of opportunity, of access, of right, of freedom. And so in that regard, I think the spirit of the feminist movement, I really align with it. I really resonate with it. And much of my life, actually, I've spent around very major social causes. I haven't really fought at the forefront for the feminist movement, but of course, it's always been part of my journey as a woman, and being immersed in social causes and social change. You obviously come across these larger issues, which are gender equality and such. So,
And some of these things, well, first of all, I would identify as a feminist, but now hearing you talk about it, my identification as a feminist includes all genders, all religions, all sexuality.
Right.
So I'm a humanist too. And actually, I was listening to an Instagram live a couple of days ago between Scott Stewart, who's at Scott Creates on Instagram, and Bethany Meyers. And they were talking about her Become movement, about body neutrality. And they were talking about the difference between body positivity and body neutrality. And when she explained the difference, and for her, she said that with body neutrality, it's recognizing that your body is the least important thing about you. It's what goes underneath. It's what's inside you that it's important. And I thought, oh my goodness, can that not be extrapolated to so many different things? Because as you said, these labels can either constrict us or expand us, depending on whose perspective, you know, the labels are kind of being internalized by, right? And so that's what I believe as well, that actually I'm a humanist and I believe that there should be equality and equal treatment, and everybody is an equal human being, no matter where they come from, no matter what their gender, what their sexual orientation is. No, and therefore, when we really connect with each other human to human, that's when we're going to find the most connection, because I mean, on a DNA level, we're like 97% similar or something. I think, don't quote me on that. I definitely saw something where I was staggered by highly similar. And then internally, on a soul level, I think that we all really want the same things, which is to be seen and heard and understood and valued for who we are, right? Not our label, not what we look like, but what's inside, what's underneath.
Absolutely, Lara. I think you make a great point with this neutrality of, the body, the physical body, of course, is a tool that we have to navigate the physical world, but who lives inside that body, right? Like, what's really the nature of the life inside that body, I think, is a larger question that transcends a little bit the feminist movement or specific conversations on the labels. Although it's not to say that that's not true, that the labels aren't playing a role in our lives, because that is true, right? Like, yes. on a daily basis, we see how these labels are affecting different people in different ways, and different populations in different ways. So for me, the conversation gets a little bit larger in that, how do we think about the us versus them game, right? Like, how do we transcend that, you know? And I think that's the larger conversation. Of course, we need to address the smaller, not to make them less important, but the piecemeal conversations, of course, but we're looking at a larger issue, which is the us versus them game, right? The collective game, the constant game and conversation of placing different groups in different places, essentially, of society, and treating them differently. And that's the larger question that I like to think about and ponder about and address. And that's why I call myself a humanist and not a feminist, although I do agree with the spirit of the feminist movement.
Well, I mean, it's very clear from this that you're a deep thinker. And from talking to you, even just like when we were standing in line, and then other conversations that we've had, we've really connected a lot on the fact that we both have done a lot of inner work. And I would
Mhm.
love to talk to you a little bit about that, because for me, I came to inner work later. So I think I only started really doing inner work in my 30s, I would say.
Mhm.
But for
Mhm.
you, you started when you were a teenager. So I would love to hear you tell us a little bit about that, and also a little bit about what prompted you, and what things you found useful, because obviously as you evolve and do, different kinds of inner work, you get drawn to different people. So yeah, please tell us a little bit about your journey.
Oh, thank you for touching upon this topic, Lara, because I think for me, developing our inner world is one of the major not only responsibilities but joys we have through life. Not only is it our responsibility to really develop and get to know who we are inside out, it's also a joy. It's a joyous journey, and naturally it can be a little bit painful at times, because looking at fears to the face, and facing also our darkness and those shadows that we may like less about ourselves, and maybe a little bit afraid of, and just facing those can be a little bit painful and hard, but it's also so beautiful because we become more whole as we're integrating all these parts of who we are. So how it all started is I was a teenager. I come from a family setting that was quite challenging, and so growing up, both my curiosity but also this challenging family setting really prompted me to ask bigger questions, right? Like, what is life about? What is this all about? What is all this drama about? Drama, the big drama of life, and what am I here for? And who lives inside of me, and who's thinking? Like, who's sending these thoughts, and where are they coming from, and all of these things. And oh, it aches, or oh, it feels amazing, and all of these emotions and ups and downs. I was extremely curious about where what all of this was about. So I initiated my inquiry through Buddhism. I joined a Buddhist community in Mexico where I lived, and I started inquiring. They did have amazing answers to my large life questions. So I really liked, I wouldn't call myself a Buddhist again. I go back to the principle of really subscribing to ideas and the spirit of some schools of thought, but not necessarily I would call myself a Buddhist. But
Mm.
I did find a lot of answers in Buddhism and a lot of practices like meditation. At a very young age, I started attending meditation retreats, silent retreats. I'd be quiet for 5 days in complete silence, when
How old were you
people
when you
my
did your?
age, 16, 17,
Oh
and
my
people my
goodness.
age were out partying or socializing, and I was like retreating. Of course I was also doing the socializing part. I was also exploring. I was never really like a lonely kid. I was really out there and exploring, but at the same time I would have these like exploration phases, but then I would also retrieve from the world and just really decorate my inner life, and explore it. So it was Buddhism. And then I did start practicing a lot of meditation. I did start practicing a lot of body work, like understanding my body. And also that came later in my 20s through disease. I started facing a lot of different difficult illnesses that were coming up for me, and I couldn't understand where is this all coming from. And again, my deep curiosity, I was like, no, this can't be only my physical body. This has to have another root, a root where I constantly get sick and I end up in the hospital and I end up really feeling lonely and broken. And where is this all coming from? And so I did a lot of deep work in understanding the relationship between our emotions and our physical body, our thoughts, and how they relate and how they actually impact the way our biological system operates. If you're thinking negatively and you're feeling very low frequency feelings like sadness, like anger, resentment, all of those feelings can really be trapped in our bodies if we don't process them correctly.
And
And
it's
then that becomes
exhausting as well, right? Like
absolutely
the
like we
low
put our
energy. Yeah, yeah.
absolutely we put our bodies through this really tough journey of becoming resilient but also not knowing what's going on. We our environment has highly evolved, Lara, with years, but our bodies haven't really changed much from hundreds of years back. So for example, nowadays, feeling the stress of an email or feeling the stress of not being liked on your social networks, that
Yeah.
can create the same amount of stress to your body as when you lived in the savannas, like we as a species lived in the savannah and
Yeah.
were chased by a lion. You see,
Yeah.
so that's the same stress response
Whereas
that
now
our
it's like
bodies.
50 million like notifications a day, and yeah,
Exactly. So that level of stress that we're really igniting in our bodies is the same as it was when we were chased by a lion, although now it's just an email or and it's all these stimuli constantly creating that stress response. So understanding how to befriend emotions, how to understand that thoughts are just thoughts. I'm not my thoughts, you know, I am not my
you
thoughts.
learned that as a teenager,
In my 20s, I
in
started
your
learning this
20s.
in my 20s, when I started facing disease and understanding disease and understanding all of these different components of who we are, right? The thoughts, the emotions, the physical body, that is a wonderful machine, our bodies that we can be so grateful to, that they're breathing us without us doing anything, you know, they're digesting without us doing anything, they're sending blood everywhere. And anyway, I started getting really deep into the practice of what is this amazing tool that I live with. And yoga was a great and still is a great practice for me. I really love practicing yoga. It really brings you to your body and it creates a strong connection with it. I did practice tai chi for a while, qigong, different practices, but yoga has been the most consistent. Meditation has been really consistent. And therapy, Lara, I think therapy has really changed the way I live, you know? And for me, therapy has been a real life-saving practice. Why? Not because the therapist is meant to fix us. We're not
No.
there to be fixed, you know? There's really no aim to be fixed in therapy. And if your therapist wants to fix you, you should change therapists probably.
And if you think you're going to come out of therapy, you're like, okay, I'm all shining and bright
Finally.
and new. I'm done.
No.
There's no done.
No,
With
course
inner
not.
work, there is no done. It's like
There is no destination.
There's no destination. It
It's a
really is
journey.
the journey.
It really is.
It sounds so cliche, but like, as a lot of people say, including my cousin Kyle, like, cliches are cliches because they're true.
Of course, and they contain so much truth because you are becoming. You never became. You never became.
Yeah.
You are in constant becoming. And so,
Yes.
for example, therapy helps you to just look at yourself with a perspective in that becoming. You know, I call it. Well, I'll translate it directly from Spanish, but I call it like becoming the watcher of my own movie. I become the audience of my movie, which
The
is my life.
observer, right? You're
The observer.
That's being an observer is something that I only learned in my 40s. And when I say my 40s, I mean last year during COVID, because I was very late to meditation. So I'd done the Oprah and Deepak 21-day challenges, which I would normally start on day 5 and then be playing catch up because the videos were only available for 5 days. So starting at day 5 only meant, you know, that I had to do it that day. And it would be like this counter, get to the end of the 21 days, and I'd be like, oh, phew, I'm done. But during COVID, I was meditating every single day with Dr. Shefali and doing it every single day in a guided way with somebody. And I wanted to, you know, show up every day because she was a real anchor for me through COVID. It gave me something that I'd never had before. And that was the ability to see my thoughts as separate from me and to be an observer. And that has just opened me up so much, being an observer, because when you're an observer, it's like you are the narrator in your own head. And even if like you have an extreme reaction to something, you know, you lose your temper or you know, an email or a notification comes up and, you know, you have the thought, it's like you immediately then catch yourself and go, oh, okay, I'm clearly, you know, feeling this. And you can relate the thought as not just that thought, but you understand what's behind it because you understand yourself more. And that is a really incredible thing, which, you know, I definitely did not have for the first 3 decades of my life.
Well, we are becoming, Lara. We are becoming. We keep becoming. So we're always discovering more of ourselves, you know. And I would like to add actually a word to that, observer. And for us women, I think it's a word that is very important, and that is kind observer. The kindness piece, I think, is so
Yes.
important, right? Because we tend to be really kind to others, to be really kind to others, right? And then when it comes to us, we tend to be really harsh with ourselves, you know.
Yes.
And being observing ourselves can be really tricky as well, because then you're like, oh, I'm doing this, oh, I'm doing that, oh, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that, and then you start judging yourself for it, you
Yeah.
know. Honestly, Lara, you wouldn't judge me if I called you up and I told you, oh, Lara, I've been having these very dark thoughts of fear about moving to Amsterdam, and I'm so afraid and I don't know what to do and I feel anxious. What would you tell me? Would you tell me, oh, there you go again, Karime, with these thoughts? No.
Never. And that is
Be
the most
kind.
incredible thing. This recognition, as you said, that we can be so kind to others, but not as kind to ourselves. And again, for me, it's been very recent. Only in the last year have I been able to mute that very, very harsh inner critic that I've been that I didn't even realize I could mute, because I thought that all of these things were me. I didn't realize that there were things that I can kind of go, you're not helpful. That's not going to be good. You know,
Not now, thank you.
yeah, not now. Or that's not helpful. Or I'm going to take myself to bed. You know, sometimes I literally will just take myself to bed. If I'm not feeling great, I won't even push through. I'm like, okay, time to sleep now.
Lara, it's time for a nap.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and for the audience listening to us, this may come across as like, oh, these two may be crazy, you know, like they speak to themselves and they have all of these voices and this, but it is true that we all really have all of these parts in ourselves that are kind of fighting for airtime, you
Attention.
know,
Yeah.
for
Fighting for
attention, for
attention. Yeah.
airtime. And so it's important to just recognize we're not them. They coexist as part of our narrative and part of our experience, but we are this larger being that observes, that has the capacity to take distance, to watch the movie from a distance, right? And I think it's a beautiful place to be in. It's also, it requires a lot of kindness, like I said, and a lot of patience to
Self-compassion.
oneself
Yeah.
and self-compassion. It's being patient. I have the inner, I hear my inner critic every other day, and I'm like, oh, you're back, weren't you gone? And she keeps coming back, and befriending her actually has been more of my journey, rather than like silencing and killing that part of me, you know. It's like befriending her. I'm like, okay, I know you really care about how this or that comes out, like, or I how you come across, or how I know you care about that inner, I call that inner critic. I will share with you and the audience. I feel safe enough and friend of her enough, so I can share Special K.
Okay.
Special K. And then she comes on and she's like she wants me to be perfect, right? And she's criticizing everything, and I'm like, Special K, this time, or this is not this is not the place, you know. And I start, and I even laugh at her sometimes. I'm like, oh, Special K, you really are cute. You really are cute, you know? And it's becoming friends with all of who we are, really.
Yes, I definitely agree with with that. I wouldn't say that I've named mine. I kind of more have muted mine, because I'm like, I've literally been, it's been so deafening for the whole of my life. And it's because it's been so deafening, it hasn't given me the mental freedom to kind of really
Mm.
figure out who I am, and, you know, take off the layers and the expectations and the labels and everything, and really figure out who I am at my essence. That, like, I've needed to mute mute her. But what I think is also helpful is that when you have people in your life, whoever they might be, who can do for you what you do to a friend, then you kind of, what I've found is that I start hearing their voice in my head. So I start hearing the kinder version. So even if I instinctively have a reaction to something, then I will hear that person's voice telling me what they would tell me if they were on the phone with me. And it kind of like, I don't even feel as much in resistance with that anymore. Like, I've absorbed the kinder voice, which is such a huge relief.
Mm. I celebrate you for that, Lara.
Thank you, thank you. It's a long time coming, but it's a journey, and that's the most important thing. So one thing that I've realized in the last year is that I didn't really have a strong sense of self. Now, it didn't mean that I didn't have a sense of self at all, but I didn't have a strong grounded sense of self where, and the reason I knew that I didn't have that was that in certain moments and in certain situations, I was very affected by what other people would say or think about me. And it could totally derail me. And I felt like this leaf kind of like waving a lot, in the wind, not rooted. And so when did you, well, first of all, do you feel like you have a strong sense of self? And if you do, how did you start to cultivate that?
So as each and every of my answers, this will be a little bit. I will do a little bit of a dance here with ideas. So since I started really getting into the Buddhist practices, one of the truths of existence, one of the three truths of existence in Buddhism, according to Buddhism, is self is an illusion. The self is an illusion. And I don't want to get too spiritual here or too woo-woo or speak about like Buddhism necessarily, but what I want to do is bring that into the picture of how do we navigate this world if we supposedly aren't a self, and at the same time the world is asking from us to be somebody, like the world is constantly asking us to label ourselves, to get a job, to get a career, to study something, right? Like even the questions we ask each other, for example, in Spanish, what do you do? And that becomes, in Spanish is even worse. We ask, who are you? And then the person replies, I'm an engineer, I'm a lawyer, right? And it's almost like, well,
so your role represents who you are,
becomes who you are. And so we get more and more cling to these identities and these labels, and then that is, I think, really much tied up with the idea of us versus them, because then you get this identity so strongly, right? Like this separatedness from the other, because you have this strong sense of self, that you look at yourself and your storyline and your narrative as an individual from the other. And yes, we experience life individually, but really we have a collective experience, right? We can't deny that. We inhabit a planet that has us that brings us collective experience. Just think of COVID as a perfect example. It's the perfect illustration of how interconnected and how shared our human experience is. You see? And so it's a really beautiful dance between okay, I must live as a self because I must be someone here, right? And at the same time, I have this larger truth that is suggesting that I should shed all that identity so that I can be living a shared experience with all of life, not only humans, but other beings that are alive, the animals, the planet itself that is breathing itself, So imagine what I want to do right now is to give you a little bit of like narrow down my very elevated ideas into a very concrete example. Imagine your Google Maps. So Google Maps is very useful because it has the map, the territory, it shows you the streets and the territory, but it also shows you within that territory. The map on its own would be useful, but then what is really beautiful about Google Maps and all of those navigating tools, is digital tools, is that you see yourself as a dot in the map. And that's really helpful, you see? So I think that to have a sense of self, like using yourself as a dot, like using your sense of self as being that dot in the map, I think is really helpful, right? Because then you see the dot and you're like, oh, the dot takes right, goes left, goes straight. The dot is around other dots, and it's a really helpful way to navigate the complexity of the world and life. Now, when it comes to developing a sense of self, I think it's very important that we do that on the ground of the understanding that we are part of each other, that we are living in this network that is interconnected, right? And that everyone is living a shared experience. What I do to you, I do to myself. What you do to me, you do to yourself. So it's really understanding that will help us understand that yes, we live an individual experience, but on the ground of a shared life.
And so with the individual experience, like when did you start feeling grounded in who you were?
That was a question when, and I think it was around my mid 20s, but more so toward my 30s. Now I'm 35, so more toward my 30s, I started like,
Should
okay,
wait till you get to your 40s. It's great.
I can't wait. I'm excited actually. It's a joy to live, and I feel like more toward my 30s, I started really understanding what I'm made of, like what I really am, which really transcends all of these ideas and labels, and much more so profoundly in these past 15 months, Lara, where I decided to sell everything I owned. I decided to embark on an adventure with my partner, to leave my work, to leave my position, my salary, to leave all of those self identifiers, really, all of those items of identity, to really let go of all. I downsized to a little suitcase to travel with for 15 months, a hand luggage. So really letting go of so many things was really freeing,
Yeah,
because
because
then I am what
when
I
you
am.
let go of so many things and so many labels and roles and titles, then it's like you literally did a stripping away and a stripping down to then
Yeah.
figure out, okay, this is me.
And this is what I am. And so this sense of self that you're referring to, this finding yourself and really grounding into what you really are, is beautiful, because then I know I'm not my job title. I'm not any role I'm playing in society. I am all of this that inhabits me, and then I go out and play the role, and then I go and do a job, and then I go and play. But I'm really who I am, regardless of all of that. And that might change with life, right? Sometimes we have great job positions, sometimes we're living on our savings, and life
Yeah,
changes, right? The outer condition changes. But if we remain aware of what we are constantly, then we're
and
just
who we
playing
are in our soul and
in
our
our
spirit.
soul.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, I could talk to you forever. And so what we're going to do is we're going to bring this part one to a close, and we're going to be right back for part two. So thank you so much, and we will see
Thank
you
you.
all in part two.
Thank you.